When my mother told me I was a mistake, I was 15 years old. I remember the kitchen light flickering above her head. I remember the smell of burnt toast. I remember the way her voice cracked, not with sadness, but with a tired kind of anger that had been sitting inside her for years. She did not yell. She did not throw anything. She just looked at me with eyes that were too dry to cry, and she said, "Lily, you were the biggest mistake of my life. And I am done paying for it." I did not cry that night. I want to tell you that I did. I want to tell you that I begged her to take it back, that I held her hands and asked her why. But I didn't. I just stood there in my school uniform, holding a half-eaten apple, and I nodded. Like a child who had been waiting for that sentence her whole life. Like a child who had already heard it 1,000 times in the silence between her words. She told me to pack a bag. One bag. She said I could take whatever fit inside it, but I could not take anything that she had bought for me. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, looking at the small pink suitcase she had given me when I was 7, and realizing it did not belong to me. So I took a black trash bag from under the kitchen sink, and I filled it with the things I knew were mine. A few clothes. My library card. A photograph of my grandmother I had hidden in a book. A toothbrush. That was it. That was my childhood. I walked out of that house at 11:30 at night. It was a Tuesday in October. The street was quiet, and the street lamp on the corner was buzzing, the way it always did when it was about to rain. I did not look back at the house. I did not knock on a neighbor's door. I just walked, with that trash bag bouncing against my leg, all the way down to the bus station, where I sat on a bench until the sun came up. 17 years later, I was standing in a courtroom in a different town, in a different state, wearing a soft gray sweater I had bought for myself with money I had earned. And I watched 2 officers put handcuffs on the same woman who had called me a mistake. She did not see me at first. She was looking at the floor. But when she finally looked up and our eyes met, I did not feel hate. I did not feel joy. I felt something quieter than that. Something heavier. Something that took me 17 years to understand. This is the story of how I got there. This is the story of how a girl with a trash bag became a woman with a life. And this is the story of the day I finally let her go. My name is Lily. I was born in a small town in the middle of nowhere, the kind of town where everyone knows your last name before they know your face. There was one grocery store, one church, one school, and one road that led out. Most people never took that road. My mother never took that road. She used to say the world outside was full of people waiting to hurt you, and the safest thing you could do was stay where you were born and keep your head down. My mother's name was Diane. She was 22 when she had me. My father, from what little I was ever told, left before I was born. She never spoke his name. She never showed me a picture of him. Once, when I was about 8, I asked her what color his eyes were, and she looked at me like I had slapped her. She said, "Don't ever ask me about him again." So I didn't. We lived in a small white house on the edge of town. It had 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with yellow walls, and a front porch with a wooden swing that creaked when you sat on it. From the outside, it looked like the kind of home where a happy family might live. From the inside, it was very quiet. My mother worked 2 jobs. She cleaned houses during the day and worked the night shift at a diner 3 nights a week. I learned how to make my own sandwiches before I was 6. I learned how to do my own laundry before I was 8. I do not want you to think she was always cruel. She wasn't. There were soft days too. There were Sunday mornings when she would let me climb into her bed, and she would read to me from an old book of fairy tales. There were evenings when she would braid my hair and tell me I had pretty hands. There were birthdays when she would bake a small cake from a box and put 1 candle on it, no matter how old I was turning, because she said 1 candle was enough to make a wish. But there was always something underneath. Always. Even when she smiled at me, there was something tight around her eyes. Even when she hugged me, her arms felt like she was holding back. As I got older, I started to understand. I was a reminder. Every time she looked at me, she saw the life she did not get to have. She saw the boy who left. She saw the dreams that ended the day she found out she was pregnant. And I am not blaming her for feeling that. I am only telling you what I felt as a child, sitting across from her at the kitchen table, eating quiet meals and trying to be small. My grandmother was the warmth in our house. My mother's mother. We called her Nana. She lived 3 streets away in a tiny apartment above the post office, and she would come over almost every Saturday with a bag of groceries and a bottle of homemade lemonade. Nana was the one who told me I was smart. Nana was the one who taught me how to read before I started school. Nana was the one who held me in her lap and told me that my mother loved me, even when it did not feel like she did. Some people don't know how to show love, sweet pea, she would whisper. But that doesn't mean they don't feel it. I believed her. For a long time, I believed her. When I was 12, Nana got sick. It happened quickly. One Saturday, she was on our porch, laughing at something I had said, and 3 months later she was in a hospital bed, holding my hand with fingers that felt as thin as paper. She told me to be brave. She told me to read every book I could find. She told me that one day, when I was old enough, I would understand that not all families look the same, and that love can come from places you do not expect. And then she closed her eyes and she did not open them again. Something changed in my mother after that. Something cracked. The little softness she used to have on Sunday mornings disappeared. The fairy tales stopped. The braids stopped. The one-candle birthdays stopped. She started drinking in the evenings, just a glass or two at first, then more. She started bringing home a man named Frank who worked at the auto shop. Frank had a thick mustache and a loud laugh, and he never looked at me when he spoke. He would walk past me in the hallway like I was a piece of furniture. I think, for him, that's exactly what I was. I was 13 when Frank moved in. By 14, I had learned how to be invisible. I came home from school, did my homework at the kitchen table, made myself a sandwich, and went to my room. I stayed there until morning. I did not eat dinner with them. I did not ask for help with anything. I did not speak unless I was spoken to. And most days, I was not spoken to at all. Looking back, I think I was already grieving long before that night in October. I was grieving the mother I used to have, the one who smelled like lemonade, the one who used to brush my hair before bed. I was grieving Nana. I was grieving the version of my life where someone, somewhere, had wanted me. And I think my mother was grieving too. I think Frank was the noise she used to drown out her own grief. And I, somehow, had become the silence she could not stand. The fights started slowly. They always do, don't they? They start with a sigh. A look. A door closed a little too hard. You don't notice the first one or the second one. But by the 10th, you start walking on tiptoes. By the 50th, you stop breathing when you hear footsteps in the hallway. The first real fight I remember was about a school field trip. I was in 8th grade, and our class was going to a science museum 2 hours away. The trip cost $42. I had saved up $26 from babysitting our neighbor's twins on weekends, and I asked my mother, very politely, if she could help me with the rest. She was sitting on the couch with Frank, watching TV, a half-empty glass of wine on the coffee table. She did not even turn her head. "We don't have money for that," she said. I said, "It's only $16 more, Mom. I have the rest." Frank laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. He said, maybe she should learn to save better. I stood there for a moment, looking at the back of my mother's head. Then I said the thing I should not have said. I said, "You spent more than that on wine this week." She turned. Slowly. And for the first time in my life, I saw something in her eyes that scared me. It wasn't anger. It was disgust. She said, "Go to your room, Lily. And don't ask me for anything ever again." I did not go to the museum. I told my teacher I was sick that day. I sat at home and read a book in my room while the bus went without me. And when I came down for dinner that evening, my mother had made spaghetti. She served some to Frank. She served some to herself. There was no plate for me. When I sat down, she did not look up. She just said, there wasn't enough. I went back upstairs. I did not eat that night. I ate 2 crackers from a box I kept hidden in my closet, and I told myself it was no big deal. I told myself a lot of things in those years. I became very good at telling myself things. By the time I was 14, the fights had a pattern. They almost always started in the kitchen. They almost always involved Frank, even when he wasn't the one yelling. He would say something small, something cutting, something like, "You're getting a little chubby, Lily." Or, "You look just like your father when you make that face." And my mother would not defend me. She would not say a word. She would just keep stirring whatever was on the stove, like the words had not even been spoken. I learned to cook for myself. I learned to do my own grocery shopping with the money I made babysitting. I learned to fix the leaky faucet in the bathroom because Frank refused to do it and my mother said it wasn't her problem. I was 14 years old, and I was running my own little life inside of theirs, and they did not even notice. The dialogue started getting sharper. I remember one Saturday morning, I came downstairs in jeans and a t-shirt, and my mother looked at me from the kitchen sink and said, "Why do you wear those tight things? You look cheap." I said, "They're just jeans, Mom." She said, "Cheap girls wear cheap clothes." I went back upstairs and changed into a loose sweater, even though it was 80 degrees outside. I came back down and she did not say anything else. I made my own breakfast. I ate it standing up by the window, looking out at the yard. Frank walked past me with his coffee and said, "Move." And I moved. The school noticed first. My English teacher, Mrs. Patterson, was the first adult who ever looked me in the eye and said, "Lily, is everything okay at home?" I was 15 by then, and I had just gotten an A on a paper I wrote about loneliness. I lied. I smiled and said everything was fine. I said my mom was just busy with work. I said Frank was a good guy. I said all the things I had practiced saying. Mrs. Patterson did not push. She just nodded and told me that her door was open. She said, "If you ever need to talk, Lily, just knock." I never knocked. I should have. I think about Mrs. Patterson sometimes, even now. I think about the way she looked at me, and I wonder if she saw something I could not see in myself yet. I wonder if she knew, the way teachers sometimes do, that the child sitting in her classroom was already disappearing. The summer I turned 15, things got worse. Frank lost his job at the auto shop. He was home all day, drinking beer on the porch, watching TV with the volume too loud. My mother picked up extra cleaning jobs to make up the difference. She came home tired, with red hands and an empty face, and the first thing she did was pour herself a drink and sit on the couch next to Frank. They would talk in low voices about money, about how tight things were, about how something had to give. I was the something. I just did not know it yet. I remember one night in August. It was so hot the windows were open, and you could hear cicadas screaming outside. I was in my room, reading a book about a girl who runs away from home and joins a traveling circus. I remember thinking, that's a stupid story. Nobody really runs away. And just as I thought that, I heard my mother's voice rise downstairs. She was saying my name. She was saying it the way you say the name of someone who has wronged you. I crept to the top of the stairs. I sat down on the second step from the top, where I always sat when I wanted to listen. They were in the kitchen. Frank was at the table. My mother was at the sink. Frank said, "She eats more than she's worth." My mother said, "I know." Frank said, "She's not even your kid anymore. She's a stranger living in your house." My mother said, "I know." I sat there on those stairs for what felt like an hour. My legs went numb. My ears were ringing. And I knew, with a kind of cold clarity that scared me, that something was coming. Something was being decided about me, downstairs, while I sat in the dark. And there was nothing I could do to stop it. The next morning, my mother made me pancakes. She had not made me pancakes in over 2 years. She put 3 on a plate, with butter and syrup, and she set it down in front of me like it was a peace offering. She sat across from me with a cup of coffee, and she watched me eat. She did not say anything. She just watched. And I knew in my chest that she was trying to apologize for something that had not happened yet. I knew she was trying to say goodbye in the only way she knew how. I ate every single pancake. I did not taste them. For about a week after that, things were strangely quiet. Frank did not say anything cruel. My mother did not say much at all. They watched TV together in the evenings, and I stayed in my room, and the cicadas kept screaming outside. I told myself maybe it was over. Maybe whatever they had been talking about that night had passed. Maybe I had imagined how bad it sounded. Then one Tuesday in October, I came home from school and my mother was sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of wine in front of her. There was no food cooking. There was no music playing. Frank was not home. The house was as still as a held breath. She said, "Sit down, Lily." I sat. She did not look at me when she said it. She was looking at her glass, turning it slowly between her fingers. She said, "I need you to listen to me, and I need you not to argue with me, and I need you not to cry." I nodded. I did not say a word. She said, "Frank and I have been talking. Things are not working. Money is tight, and the house is too small, and you and Frank do not get along, and I am tired. I am so tired, Lily. I am tired all the way down to my bones. And I have decided that the best thing for everyone is for you to leave." I think my body understood before my mind did. My hands started shaking. My chest got hot. But my face stayed perfectly still, because some part of me had been preparing for that exact sentence for as long as I could remember. I said, "Where am I supposed to go, Mom?" And then she said it. The sentence that has lived in my chest for 17 years. She said, "Lily, you were the biggest mistake of my life. And I am done paying for it. I don't care where you go. Just go." I want to tell you the worst part of that night, but I have to tell you the part before it first. Because the worst part isn't what she said. The worst part is what she did next. After she said those words, she stood up. She walked to the cabinet under the sink. She pulled out a black trash bag, the same kind I would use, and she folded it neatly on the counter. She did not look at me. She said, "You can take what fits in this. But don't take anything I paid for." Then she went into her bedroom, and she closed the door. And I sat at that kitchen table for a long, long time, listening to a kitchen clock tick and a refrigerator hum. And I realized, very slowly, that nobody was going to come back out. Nobody was going to say they didn't mean it. Nobody was going to hug me and tell me to unpack. This was not a fight. This was not a punishment. This was an ending. I went upstairs. I took the trash bag. I packed the way I told you I packed. A few clothes. My library card. The photograph of Nana. My toothbrush. I also took a notebook I had been writing in for 2 years. Stories I had made up. Letters I had written to my father that I never sent. Things that belonged to nobody but me. I took the small jar of coins I had been saving from babysitting, which had $38.60 in it. I took a sweater Nana had knitted for me when I was 10. It was too small, but it smelled like her closet, and I could not leave without it. I came back downstairs at 11 o'clock. The lights in the living room were off. The TV was off. Frank still was not home. My mother's bedroom door was still closed. I stood in the kitchen for 1 minute. I waited. I gave her 1 minute to come out. I am not sure why. Maybe I wanted to give her a chance to be a mother one more time. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that I had asked. Maybe I just needed 60 seconds to make sure this was real. She did not come out. I opened the front door, and I walked down the porch steps with the trash bag bouncing against my leg, and I started walking toward the bus station on the other side of town. It was about 3 miles. My feet hurt before I was halfway there. I sat down twice to rest. I cried once, behind a closed gas station where nobody could see me. And then I got up and I kept walking. The bus station was a small building with 1 ticket window and a row of plastic chairs. The man behind the window was reading a newspaper. He did not look at me twice. I sat down in a chair near the door, and I put the trash bag between my feet, and I stayed there until morning. I am not going to tell you everything that happened in the days after that. Some of it I am still not ready to say out loud. But I will tell you this. I did not sleep on the street. I did not go hungry for more than a day. There was a woman named Carol who worked at a diner near the bus station, and she noticed me sitting in a corner booth for too long, nursing a single cup of coffee I could barely afford. Carol was about 60 years old, with gray hair pulled back in a clip and a kind voice that did not push. She sat down across from me on her break, and she asked me where I was going. I said I didn't know. She asked me where I was coming from. I said I didn't know that either. She nodded slowly. She did not ask me any more questions. She got up, went behind the counter, came back with a plate of eggs and toast, and put it in front of me. She said, "Eat. Then we'll figure something out." Carol took me home that night. "Just for a few days," she said. "Just until I figured out what to do." She lived in a small apartment above a hardware store with 2 cats and a parakeet named Henry. She gave me her couch and a clean blanket and a glass of water on the side table. She did not ask me about my mother. She did not ask me about my father. She just told me that the bathroom was down the hall and that breakfast would be ready at 7 and that I should sleep as long as I needed to. I slept for 14 hours. A few days turned into a few weeks. A few weeks turned into a year. And then another year. Carol became the closest thing to family I had. She helped me enroll in a new school in the next town over, where nobody knew my mother. She helped me get a part-time job washing dishes at the diner. She helped me apply for a special program for kids who needed extra support, and the program paid for things like a winter coat and a pair of shoes that actually fit me. Carol never tried to be my mother. That was one of the things I loved most about her. She did not try to fill a hole that wasn't hers to fill. She just stood next to me, like a quiet tree, while I tried to grow. I graduated high school at 18. Carol came to my graduation, and she clapped so hard her hands turned red. I went on to community college on a scholarship for students who had been in difficult situations. I studied early childhood education because I wanted to be the kind of adult that little kids could trust. I wanted to be a Mrs. Patterson. I wanted to be a Carol. I wanted to be a Nana. While I was building this life, I never once tried to contact my mother. Not once. I did not call her. I did not write her. I did not look her up online. I made a decision, somewhere in those early years on Carol's couch, that the chapter with my mother was closed. Not because I hated her. Because I was tired. Because I could not survive carrying her with me, and I had to choose between her and myself, and for the first time in my life I chose me. But there is a thing you should know about wounds. You can stop touching them. You can cover them up. You can build a whole new life around them. But they are still there. They do not just disappear because you decide not to look at them. I was 26 years old when I got the phone call. I was at work in a small daycare classroom, sitting on the floor reading a book about a hungry caterpillar to a group of 3-year-olds. My phone was on silent in my pocket and it buzzed. I let it go to voicemail. When I checked it on my lunch break, the message was from a woman who said she was a sergeant with the police department in my hometown. She said my name. She said she needed me to call her back at my earliest convenience. I stood in the daycare parking lot for 10 minutes before I could press the call button. The wind was blowing leaves across the asphalt. I could hear children laughing inside the building. My hand was shaking. When I finally called back, the sergeant was kind. She had a soft voice. She told me that my mother had been arrested 2 days ago on charges of theft and fraud and elder abuse. She told me my mother had been working as an in-home caretaker for elderly people and that she had been stealing from them for years, cashing their checks, selling their things. In 2 cases, leaving them alone for days without food. The sergeant told me there was going to be a trial. She told me I was listed as my mother's next of kin in some old paperwork, and she wanted me to know what was happening in case I wanted to be there. She said I did not have to come. She said it was completely my choice. I thanked her. I hung up. I sat down on the curb in the daycare parking lot, and for the first time in 17 years, I cried about my mother. Not little crying. Big crying. The kind that comes out of your stomach. The kind that you cannot stop, even if you want to. I cried for the daughter who had walked out of that house with a trash bag. I cried for the woman my mother had become. I cried for the elderly people who had trusted her. I cried for myself because I knew, somewhere deep in my chest, that I was going to go to that trial. I knew I was not going to be able to stay away. When the day came, I drove 4 hours back to my hometown. I had not been there in 17 years. The road into town was longer than I remembered. The trees were taller. The grocery store had a new sign. There was a coffee shop where the old hardware store used to be. Everything was the same, and everything was different, the way places get when you leave them and come back. I parked 2 blocks from the courthouse. I sat in my car for a long time, with both hands on the steering wheel, breathing the way Carol had taught me to breathe when I was scared. Slow in. Slow out. I had a small picture of Nana in my wallet. I took it out and looked at her for a minute. Then I put it back. I got out of the car. I walked. The courthouse was a big stone building with wide steps and heavy wooden doors. I went in through the metal detectors. I asked the woman at the front desk where the trial was being held. She pointed me to a courtroom on the second floor. The hallway was long and quiet. My shoes made small sounds on the tile floor. I sat in the back row. The courtroom was almost empty. There were a few people I did not recognize, sitting near the front. There was a young woman who I later learned was the daughter of one of the elderly women my mother had stolen from. There was a court reporter. There was a judge in a black robe. There was a lawyer in a navy suit. And then there was my mother. She was sitting at a table on the right side of the room, in a beige jumpsuit, with her hands folded in front of her. Her hair was almost completely gray now. Her face was thinner than I remembered. She looked smaller than she used to. She looked tired in a way that even tired people don't usually look. I sat there in the back row, and I stared at her, and I waited to feel something I recognized. Hate, joy, anger, pity, anything. But what I felt mostly was strange. I felt like I was looking at a stranger. I felt like a person who had read a book about my mother a long time ago, and had now run into the character on the street, and could not quite remember why the book had hurt so much. She did not see me. She did not turn her head once. She just looked at her hands, or at the lawyer, or at the floor. The judge asked her if she understood the charges. She said she did. The judge asked her how she pleaded. She said, guilty. Her voice was small. I had to lean forward to hear it. Guilty on 3 counts of theft. Guilty on 2 counts of fraud. Guilty on 1 count of elder abuse. The lawyer spoke. The victim's daughter spoke. She talked about her mother, who was 82, and who had trusted my mother for almost 3 years. She talked about finding her mother in a cold apartment with no food in the refrigerator and a stack of unpaid bills on the counter. She talked about how her mother cried when she realized what had happened. She talked about how her mother had stopped trusting anyone after that, and how she sat alone in her apartment now, refusing to let any caretaker in. I listened to every word. I did not look away. I felt the weight of every sentence, like small stones being placed on my chest. This was the same woman who had stood at the kitchen sink, holding a trash bag. This was the same voice that had told me I was a mistake. This was the same hands that had once braided my hair, that had once put 1 candle on a birthday cake, that had now signed a fake check in an old woman's name. When the judge handed down the sentence, my mother did not react. She did not cry. She did not gasp. She just lowered her head a little more. 6 years in state prison. Restitution to all 3 victims. Probation upon release. And then the officer stood, and they walked over to her, and they put handcuffs on her wrists. That was the moment. That was the moment she finally looked up. She lifted her head, and her eyes scanned the courtroom for the first time. They went over the empty seats. They went over the reporter. And then they landed on me, sitting in the back row, in my soft gray sweater that I had bought for myself with money I had earned. We looked at each other for what felt like a full minute. It was probably only a few seconds. Her face did something I had never seen it do before. It crumpled. Not all the way. Just enough. The corners of her mouth pulled down. Her eyes filled. And she gave one tiny, almost invisible nod. Like she was saying, I see you. Like she was saying, I know. Like she was saying every word she had never been able to say to me, in one small movement of her head. I did not nod back. I did not cry. I just sat there, and I held her gaze until the officers turned her around, and they walked her out of the courtroom through a side door. I did not go back to my car after the trial. I sat on a bench in the courthouse hallway for a long time. People walked past me. Nobody asked if I was okay. I think I looked okay. I think I looked like a normal woman in a gray sweater, just resting for a minute. But inside, something was moving. Something was shifting around. Something I had not let move in 17 years. I thought I would feel triumph. I really did. I had spent so many nights, when I was younger, imagining what it would be like to see my mother fall. I had pictured it. I had played it out in my head while I was washing dishes at the diner. I had played it out while I was studying for my final exams. I had played it out the day I signed the lease on my first little apartment, alone, with no one to celebrate with. I had thought, if I could just see her one day finally pay for what she did to me, I would feel free. But I did not feel free. I felt heavy. heavy in a way that almost felt holy. Because here is the truth I had not let myself know before that day. My mother was not the monster I had been carrying in my chest for 17 years. She was a small, gray, tired woman in a beige jumpsuit who had hurt me and who had hurt other people and who was now going to spend 6 years in a small cell thinking about the life she had wasted. She was a human being who had failed badly at being a human being. She was not a giant. She was just a person. And somehow, that was worse, and somehow, that was better. I drove back to Carol's apartment that night. Carol was 77 by then. She still lived above the hardware store, although the hardware store was a coffee shop now. She still had 2 cats, although they were different cats. Henry the parakeet had died years ago. She had a new bird now, a small yellow one named Sunshine. She made me a cup of tea, and she sat across from me at her little kitchen table, and she let me talk without interrupting. I told her everything. I told her how my mother had looked. I told her about the elderly woman. I told her about the nod. Carol listened with her hands folded around her own mug. She did not say anything for a long time. When she finally spoke, she said, "Sweetheart, sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the people who never learned how to love themselves. That is not your fault. And it is not your job to fix." I cried again. Not as hard as I had cried in the daycare parking lot. Just a slow, quiet cry. Carol got up and put her hand on my shoulder, and she did not say anything else. She did not need to. I stayed at Carol's for 3 days. I helped her clean out a closet. I cooked her dinner one night. I took Sunshine the parakeet out of her cage and let her sit on my finger. We watched old movies on her tiny TV. We talked about everything except my mother. And slowly, very slowly, something inside me started to settle. I drove home on the 4th day. The drive felt different than it had on the way out. The trees did not look so tall. The road did not look so long. I rolled down the windows. I let the wind in. I played music, soft music, music with no words. I thought about my mother sitting in a small cell somewhere. I thought about how, for the first time in our lives, we were both in places we did not choose. And in a strange way, that felt like the first thing we had ever truly shared. About 6 months after the trial, something happened that I did not expect. I got a letter. The return address was the state correctional facility. It was handwritten. The handwriting was my mother's, but it looked older than I remembered. Shakier. Like the hand of someone who had to think about every letter. I held the envelope for 2 days before I opened it. I left it on my kitchen counter, under a magazine, and I walked past it about 30 times. I asked myself if I had to read it. I asked myself if I was strong enough. I asked myself if it was even worth it. Finally, on a Sunday morning, with a cup of coffee and the sunlight coming in through the window, I sat down at my kitchen table and I opened the letter. It was 3 pages long. I am not going to share all of it, because some of it is just hers and mine. But I will tell you the part that mattered most. She wrote, "Lily, I do not expect you to write back. I do not expect you to forgive me. I do not even expect you to read this. I am writing it because I have a lot of time in here to think, and what I think about most is you. I think about the night I sent you out of the house with a black bag. I think about your face. I think about how small you looked. I have made many wrong decisions in my life, but that one was the wrongest of all. You were not a mistake, Lily. You were the only good thing I ever made. And I broke you because I did not know how to love something good without breaking it. I am so sorry. I am so sorry." I read the letter 4 times. I cried through all 4. Then I put it in the box at the back of my closet, where I kept the photograph of Nana and a few other things that I needed to keep but did not need to look at every day. I did not write back right away. I waited. I needed to know what I really felt before I said anything. I did not want to write out of anger. I did not want to write out of pity. I wanted to write the truth, whatever the truth turned out to be. It took me almost a year to write back. The letter I sent was short. I wrote, "I read your letter. I have thought about it many times. I do not know yet if I can forgive you, but I do not hate you. I hope you are taking care of yourself. I am taking care of myself. I am a teacher now. I have a small life and it is mine and I am happy in it. I do not know if I will write to you again. But I wanted you to know that I read it. And I wanted you to know that I am okay. Lily. I mailed it on a Friday. I did not expect a response. I did not even know if I wanted one. But about 3 weeks later, another letter came. And then, slowly, very slowly, over the next 2 years, we wrote to each other about once every couple of months. Short letters. Careful letters. Letters where we did not push too hard or ask for too much. I told her about my classroom, about the children I taught. She told me about a small library she helped run inside the prison. She told me about a woman she had befriended who was teaching her how to crochet. I told her about Carol. She wrote back and said, "Tell Carol thank you for saving the daughter I could not save." I did not visit her in prison. I want to be honest about that. I thought about it. I sat with the idea many times. But I knew in my heart that I was not ready, and that going before I was ready would only hurt both of us. Forgiveness, I have learned, is not one big door you walk through. It is 100 small doors, and you open them one at a time, and sometimes you stand at one for years before you turn the handle. That is okay. That is part of it. There were other things I had to learn to forgive too. Not just my mother. I had to forgive myself for all the things I had told myself when I was a child. I had to forgive the part of me that believed her. The part of me that thought, for a long time, that maybe I really was a mistake. That maybe if I had been smarter, or quieter, or smaller, she would have wanted me. I had to look at that little girl who had sat on the bus station bench with a trash bag at her feet, and I had to tell her again and again, it was not your fault. You did nothing wrong. You were a child. You deserved to be loved. I started seeing a therapist a few months after the trial. Her name was Dr. Mendez. She was a woman with curly black hair and a soft brown couch and a quiet way of asking questions that made you cry without meaning to. She helped me name things I had not been able to name for 17 years. She helped me understand that what had happened to me had a word. Neglect. Emotional abuse. Abandonment. These were not words I had used about my own life before. They had felt too big. Too dramatic. I had told myself for years that other people had it worse, that I was being too sensitive, that I should just get over it. Dr. Mendez taught me that something can be both true and not the worst. That my pain did not need to compete with anyone else's pain in order to be real. That a child sent out of a house with a trash bag is a child who has been hurt, even if she did not die, even if she did not starve, even if she made it out okay. Especially then. Sometimes especially then. I cried in Dr. Mendez's office more times than I can count. I yelled in there once, which surprised me. I had not yelled in 17 years. It felt good. It felt like setting down something I had been carrying for so long I had forgotten I was carrying it. Slowly, I started to feel lighter. Not all at once. Light comes back in small ways. You notice you slept 8 hours in a row. You notice you laughed at something without thinking. You notice a stranger smiles at you on the street and you smile back without flinching. You notice you can hear the word mother without your stomach turning into a knot. About 4 years after the trial, I met a man named David. He was a 5th grade teacher at a school near mine. He had kind eyes and a quiet sense of humor, and he asked me out for coffee 3 times before I said yes. I was scared to let him in. I had spent so long being careful with my heart that I did not know how to open it without breaking it. But David was patient. He did not push. He met Carol. Carol decided she liked him on the day he carried her groceries up 2 flights of stairs without being asked. David and I got married 2 years after we met. It was a small wedding in a backyard with about 30 people. Carol walked me down the aisle. She wore a soft purple dress and held my hand the whole way. I did not invite my mother. She was still in prison. I did write to her about the wedding afterward. I sent her a small photograph of me and David standing under a tree, holding hands. She wrote back and said it was the most beautiful picture she had ever seen. I want to take a moment here, before I get to the end of this story, to tell you about the small things. Because that is where I rebuilt my life, really. Not in the big moments. Not at the trial. Not at the wedding. Not even in the letter I finally wrote back. The big moments are the ones we remember, but the small moments are the ones that actually heal us. The small moments are where the work gets done. The first small thing was a coffee mug. I bought it at a little store about a year after I moved out of Carol's apartment. It was pale blue, with a tiny daisy painted on the side. It cost $4. I had walked past it 3 times before I bought it, because I kept telling myself I did not need it, that I already had a mug, that it was a waste of money. But that day, I picked it up and I held it in my hands, and I thought, this is allowed. I am allowed to buy a thing because I think it is pretty. I am 33 years old now, and I still have that mug. I drink my morning tea from it almost every day. Every time I lift it to my lips, I remember the girl who almost did not let herself have it. The second small thing was a plant. A little spider plant in a green ceramic pot. I bought it at a hardware store the same week I moved into my first apartment, the one I rented all by myself when I was 20. I put it on my windowsill. I watered it every Sunday. I talked to it sometimes when no one was listening. I named it Hope because I needed something in my house that had that name. That spider plant lived for 9 years. It had babies, and the babies had babies, and I gave the babies away to friends and students, and now there are little pieces of hope scattered across many homes in many cities. I cried the day the original plant finally died. David buried it in our garden, very gently, in a spot where I could see it from the kitchen window. The third small thing was learning how to take a deep breath. I know that sounds silly. Everybody breathes. But I had been breathing wrong for my whole childhood. I had been breathing the way frightened children breathe, in shallow little sips, like I was always trying not to take up too much air. Dr. Mendez taught me how to breathe all the way down, into my stomach, the way babies do before the world teaches them to hold themselves tight. The first time I took a real, full, deep breath in her office, I started crying. I did not know why. She said, "Your body is finally letting go of something it has been holding for a long time." I have been practicing that kind of breathing ever since. Sometimes, when I am stressed at school, or when I see a mother yelling at her child in a grocery store, and I feel that old tightness in my chest, I stop, and I breathe all the way down. And I remember that I am safe now. I am safe. The fourth small thing was Saturday mornings. When I was little, Saturday mornings with Nana were the only soft thing in my week. After she died, Saturday mornings became the hardest day. I used to wake up on Saturdays with a kind of sadness pressing on my chest, even on years when I had forgotten exactly why. David noticed. He did not ask me about it. He just started making Saturday mornings into something new. He started making waffles. He started putting fresh flowers on the kitchen table on Friday nights, so they would be there when I came downstairs on Saturday. He started playing the kind of soft music that does not have any words. He gave me back the morning, slowly, without ever explaining what he was doing. I do not think I have ever told him I figured it out. Maybe I will, after I am done telling this story. Maybe I will go downstairs tonight and just say, "Thank you for the Saturdays." These small things, all together, are what made me a person again. Not a survivor. Not a victim. Not a woman with a story. Just a person. A regular, breathing, living person who likes pale blue mugs and spider plants and Saturday morning waffles and a quiet man with kind eyes. That is the life I have now. It is not big. It is not famous. It is not the kind of life anyone would write a book about. But it is mine. And on most days, I love it so much my heart actually aches. There is one more thing I want to share before I close this chapter. About a year ago, one of my students stayed after class. She was 7 years old. Her name was Mia. She had quiet eyes and a habit of folding her hands very neatly on her desk, in a way that I recognized. She had been having a hard week. I had noticed her not eating her lunch. I had noticed her flinching a little when other kids laughed too loud. I had noticed the small dark circles under her eyes. She came up to my desk after the last bell, and she stood there with her backpack on, and she did not say anything for a long time. I waited. I have learned how to wait. Finally, she looked up at me with those quiet eyes, and she said, "Miss Lily, can I ask you something?" I said of course she could. She said, "Do you think kids can be bad? Like, all the way bad?" On the inside, I felt something move in my chest. I knew that question. I had asked that question myself when I was about her age, in the back of my own head, where nobody could hear me. I knelt down so I was eye level with her. I said, "Mia, sweetheart, look at me. I have been a teacher for a long time. I have met hundreds and hundreds of children. And I have not met a single one who is bad on the inside. Not one. Sometimes children are tired. Sometimes children are sad. Sometimes children are scared. But bad on the inside? That is not a real thing. Whoever told you that was wrong. Do you hear me? They were wrong. Mia started to cry. Not loud crying. Just little tears, sliding down her cheeks. I gave her a tissue. I told her she could come and talk to me anytime. I sent her home, but I made a phone call that afternoon to the school counselor, and I followed up on her every single day for the rest of the year. She is fine now. She is having a much better year. Last month, she ran into my classroom holding a drawing she had made for me. It was a picture of a tree with a girl standing under it. Underneath, in shaky pencil letters, she had written, "Thank you for telling me I am good." I keep that drawing on the corner of my desk. I look at it every morning before the kids come in. And I know, in the quietest part of my heart, that this is what my life was for. Every hard thing I went through. Every cold night. Every cruel word. Every trash bag. Every empty plate. All of it was preparation for the moment a small girl named Mia would stand in front of my desk and ask if she was bad on the inside. All of it was so that I could be the person who knelt down and said, "No, sweetheart. You are not. You never have been." If you are still listening, I want you to know that your story might be doing the same thing. Even if it does not feel like it yet. Even if you cannot see it yet. The hardest parts of your life, the parts you wish you could rip out and burn, may be the very things that someone else, somewhere down the road, will need from you. You will know things they could not have learned any other way. You will see them in a way no one else can. And when they ask you a quiet question with shaking hands, you will already have the answer ready in your mouth because you spent years and years earning it. That is not nothing. That is one of the holiest things a human life can be. Last year, my mother was released from prison. She served her full 6 years. I was 33 years old then. I was a married woman, a teacher, a homeowner, a person with friends and a garden and a life I had built with my own hands. The morning she was released, I was making pancakes for David in our kitchen. The phone rang. It was her caseworker, just letting me know, as a courtesy, that my mother had been let out and was going to a halfway house in another state. She was not coming to find me. She had asked the caseworker to please tell me that she was not going to bother me. She just wanted me to know that she was free and that she was okay. I stood in my kitchen with the phone in my hand and the smell of pancakes in the air, and I felt tears come up. Not the big kind. The small kind. The kind that just sit in your eyes and do not fall. David came over and put his arms around me without asking what was wrong. I leaned into him. I thought about that night, 17 years ago, when I had stood in another kitchen, with another woman, and pancakes had meant goodbye. And here I was, in my own kitchen, with my own pancakes, and the same word, goodbye, meant something completely different. I wrote my mother one more letter after that. I told her I was glad she was free. I told her I hoped she would build a small, quiet life. I told her she did not have to bother me, but that I was not afraid of her anymore, and that if she ever wanted to write again, I would read it. I did not say I forgave her. I did not say I loved her. I am not sure yet which of those things is true. But I said the things I could say, and I think that is enough. She wrote back once. Just a few lines. She said, "Thank you, Lily. I will not write again unless you write first. I want you to know that you have my whole heart, even if I never earned a piece of yours. Live a beautiful life. You already are." I keep that letter in the box at the back of my closet too. Next to Nana's photograph. Next to my first letter from her. Next to a small dried flower from my wedding. These are the things that made me who I am. The good and the bad. I do not throw any of them away. I do not need to. I want to say something now to whoever is listening to this. I do not know your story. I do not know what kind of kitchen you grew up in, or what kind of words were spoken to you when you were small. I do not know who told you that you were a mistake, or who made you feel like you took up too much space in your own life. But I want you to hear this, in whatever quiet room you are sitting in right now. You are not a mistake. You have never been a mistake. The people who told you that were people who could not see clearly. Their eyes were too full of their own pain to see what they had in front of them. That is their tragedy. It does not have to be yours. If you are still inside the storm, Please know that storms end. They always end. They take longer than you think they should, and sometimes they leave a lot of broken things behind, but they end. And on the other side of the storm, there is a kitchen somewhere with your name on it. There is a soft chair, and a window, and a cup of tea, and a life that fits you. You will find your Carol. You will find your Mrs. Patterson. You will find your David. You will find the people who see you. Just keep walking. Even with a trash bag. Even down a dark street. Even at 11:30 at night in October. Just keep walking. And if you are the parent of a child, or the aunt, or the uncle, or the grandmother, or the teacher, or the neighbor, or anyone who has a small person looking up at you with hopeful eyes, please, please, choose your words like they are seeds. Because they are. Whatever you plant in a child, that is what grows in them. If you plant the word mistake, it will grow inside them for years. They will weed it, and it will still come back. But if you plant the word loved, that grows too. That grows the tallest of all. I do not know if my mother will ever truly understand what she did. I do not know if she will ever fully forgive herself. I hope she finds peace. I do, in my own quiet way, hope that. But her peace is not my work anymore. My work is here. My work is the children in my classroom, and the man in my kitchen, and the old woman in the apartment above the coffee shop who still calls me Sweet Pea, and the garden in my backyard, and the small girl who lives somewhere inside me, holding a trash bag, who finally gets to put it down. I put it down a long time ago. I just did not know it. If you are listening to this, thank you. Thank you for letting me share my story. Thank you for sitting with me in the dark parts and walking with me into the light parts. We do not always know who is listening on the other side of these words. But I have learned over many years that telling our stories is not weakness. It is one of the bravest things we can do. Because every time one of us tells the truth about what happened to us, somebody else, somewhere, hears it and thinks, me too. I am not the only one. And in that quiet moment, two strangers become a kind of family. I am glad you are here. I am glad I am here. And I hope, wherever you are tonight, that the lights in your kitchen are warm, and the people in your life are kind, and the words spoken about you are the ones you deserve to hear. Good night. Be gentle with yourself. And remember, you were never the mistake. You were always the lesson someone else was not ready to learn.